Okay, let's get started. So you're probably wondering who is this guy? Scotland. Wow, a worldwide audience. This is fantastic. Thanks for joining me. So your first question is looking at me on this screen. Who is this guy? Well, my name is Tom Green, and I'm not that comedian. Basically, I have been writing tech books for about 23 years. I've written a few 100,000 tutorials. I'm also a LinkedIn Learning author. So that's kind of what I am. And my day job, I'm now retired, sort of. I used to be the professor interactive multimedia at Humber College here in Toronto. And I also spent a lot of time traveling China and lecturing at various universities. So I've been around. I've been around. So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to spend some time talking about how to find your voice because that's kind of the hardest thing you'll ever find as a writer. And I'll take that out for about, oh, I don't know. Let me just check my schedule here. I'll take that out for about 20 minutes and then I'll just open it up for a Q&A and you can ask me anything you wish. Now, the one thing I have to tell you about finding your voice is if you're thinking of doing video tutorials, there is no difference between writing a book and writing a video tutorial because you still have to write a script. And the script kind of has to have your voice and reflect you. The fundamental difference is when you write a book, nobody knows who you are. And once you're going to bump into people that read your work and they're going to say to you, you don't look at all like I thought you did. So that's kind of me. So what is this thing that I call voice? What a voice is your unique style, tone, personality, and you bring it out in such a way that you connect with the reader. It makes you instantly recognizable. Think of your favorite authors. You can open any book of theirs and know that without looking at the title of the book or the author, you know that person is writing that piece. And your voice is shaped by your experiences, sometimes your values and your beliefs, and it involves things like vocabulary, the words you use, sentence structure, pacing or cadence, and you could be formal, humorous, you could be conversational, or any other style that sort of supports your identity and connects with the readers. When I started writing tech books, I looked at the market that I was working with, and I realized that if I wanted to write a real technical book, I had to have I was writing to a very small market, very small, maybe 10% of the software users. But there was a big chunk down at the bottom. I call them the newbies or the noobs or the beginners who are really interested in learning how to use the technology, but they didn't need someone like me to come at them with all the big words and the whole bit. So I had to put them at ease. I had to develop a style that was conversational, laid back, somewhat unthreatening, but at the same time, get it through to them. Here's what you need to know to do the job. And I used to bump into guys that would write the advanced books and they'd say, why are you competing with us? And I tell them, I'm not even close. Think of me as your setup guy. Now, finding your voice is hard. And it has to be found to establish that connection with your audience. And what you need to do, and one of the things you might want to try, is experiment. Just write a few paragraphs on a topic that you're very familiar with. And ask yourself a simple question. Does this sound like me? When you're writing, you're narrating it up here. and it should be conversational. But when you first get into it, you think, oh my God. And I can remember my first book that I wrote back in 2003. I was writing a book for New Writers, which was pretty big stuff. And this was sort of me moving into the big leagues, and I was scared, absolutely scared. So I became very formal. I would say, do this, do this, do this, do this. And I bumped into a development editor. Her name was Susan Hobbs, who was probably the most vicious editor I have ever encountered. And I used the name vicious, or the word vicious, not in a derogatory sense. She pushed me hard. As a matter of fact, one of the emails I got from her when I was doing the manuscript was, okay, Tom, we got to get this right, or I'm just going to kill the contract. That'll scare you real fast. So what she did was she started working with me to find what she called my voice. I'd never a clue what that was. And she sort of dug into my personality. She dug into what I had done, and then started really, really hammering me on the work I was doing. And we stopped work on the book with a chapter, and she had me rewrite that chapter 4 or 5 times. And one of the great lessons I got from that was, you are dealing with people that don't know what you know. So why are you being so formal? Are you that way in class? And I said, no, I'm laid back. And she said, that's what's got to come across. And she said, the other thing you need to do is to tell them what they are seeing. So if I say to somebody, click this button, and the button changes color, I should say, click the button, and when the in order to just get that voice in place, it was really, really hard. But once I had it, it now ripples through everything I do. I wrote a piece for Medium a few months back on ageism. And if you read one of my books and you read my ageism article on Medium, 2 different types of work, you know they come from me, because it's just my voice, my style, my way of writing. So if you are thinking of writing a book, let me tell you something. Your editor, especially your development editor, is your best friend, not the enemy, your best friend. They are going to help you find your voice, especially the first time you do it. Now, there are numerous ways to do it. You can develop a style, and this includes structure, grammar. For instance, if grammar is really, sort of tripping you up, get a copy of The Elements of Style by Strunk and White. And you can really start picking up what I'm talking about with cadence and style. For instance, grammar, the comma, the simple comma. If I was to write out the following sentence, I walked down the street and saw something, that's just one sentence. I walked down the street, stopped, and saw something. That word stopped is between commas, and that's a switch in cadence. And if you say it up here in your head, it starts to flow. The other thing that I do when I'm writing is I actually look at the flow. I look at, does this have a logical flow? Does it go from point A to point B? And am I missing something in between? And if I am, I will add that paragraph. And again, I will read it and then really start to dig back into it. Now, if you're looking for a tool that will help you with your grammar, there's a wonderful tool out there. It's called Grammarly. You can get a free copy of it, or like myself, get a pro version, and I'm telling you, it will help you with your grammar. It'll also suggest some writing, how to change your sentence, how to change your tone, which is your voice. And that's up to you to decide. You can say, yeah, I like what you just wrote, and take it. I inevitably never do. I do change it a little bit here and there. But for grammar, it's great because it tells you where you might be missing punctuation, especially. And punctuation is tough. I mean, a change in subject or a sidebar, that would be a dash. So you would, put a dash in, make your statement, and then just continue on the sentence. Tone. Tone can be serious, it can be humorous, it can be formal, an academic paper. And I'll tell you right now, I hate academic papers. And the reason is that you're locked into a style. Your personality really can't come in. You are stuck with 1, 2, 3, 4, and you have to make it basically neutral, which is just not me. Now, some people seem to think, well, God, I can be humorous. No, that's the hardest thing to do. Humor is hard. And the reason humor is hard is simply because different people have different senses of humor. Some of them will get it, some of them won't. Some of them will just look at it and go, that's dumb. I usually inject humor in by bringing in what I call my war stories, where how I learned something. If I will talk about learning a technique by saying, oh my God, I just couldn't figure this thing out. I was just so dumb. And went to this guy and he told me, boy, you're dumb. Here's how the way it works. And I then say, wow, why didn't I think of that? And you can throw that sort of little personal thing in, but don't try and be funny. It just does not work. And I've encountered too many first-time authors or first-time writers that try to inject humor. Tone is like critical, absolutely critical. If you're listening to me right now, in your writing, because you don't know me. You're seeing me now talking away. But if you read my stuff after meeting me here, you will see that I am the same guy that's writing that stuff that's talking to you right now. And when first-time writers get going, they really try to become very formal. And that's wrong. It's just wrong. Vocabulary. There's another tip. Boy, you got to bump your vocabulary. This will trip you up every time. Aim the vocabulary at your audience. And here's a tip. Keep a dictionary and a thesaurus handy. If you don't understand how to spell a word, get yourself the dictionary and make sure you spell it properly. If you don't think the word fits and you're looking for something that's a little bit different, I'm telling you, a thesaurus is an invaluable resource. Now, Grammarly will also suggest other words that you could use. When you're dealing with technical terms, you've especially got to be clear on how properly they are spelled. And then you've got to explain them. And if you're writing a very technical document like a user manual, you're probably going to be stuck with a certain style. But if you're writing for yourself or you're writing for an audience that isn't quite familiar with what you're doing, you can use the technical words, but then explain them. I have a favorite word that is big in my industry. It's called pseudomorphism. And basically that's making things look like they're the real thing. If you were familiar with the old Apple interfaces, they used all kinds of buttons that looked like wood, gems, things like that. Well, that's a great word. It's fabulous. Learn how to spell it. That's first off. But then you better understand what it means, because you're going to have someone there reading it who does not understand. I'm sorry, it's not skeuomorphism. They're going to not understand the word. So you're going to have to find a way to explain it. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a confession here. A lot of the books I write involve code. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you put a blank piece of paper in front of me and ask me to code up a website or an app for a phone, I'm just going to look at it like this. I don't have a clue how to write code. I could not write code for the life of me. So when you get my books, you always see someone else as a co-author. I always work with a co-author. He builds on it. But here's the thing. I can read the code, which is kind of weird because I'm going to have to explain it. So I have to understand the terminology as I explain it. Don't ask me to write it, just to let me understand what it is. And I like to tell people it's a lot like being able to read Chinese but not speak it. It's very bizarre. Your point of view. This is another thing that will really help you find your voice. Feel free to mix first person, second person, and third person, such as he, she, to keep the connection with the reader. I'm always referring to other people that I'm sorry, but this seems to be freezing back and forth. So if you're missing something, my apologies. I always try to involve in my war stories individuals that I've met in my 20 years of doing this stuff and some of the great big names in the business I've met. And I've always referred to them as, Joe Smith is this, and this. And then I would say, and Joe taught me, or he taught me this, or he has this really great way of doing things that you really have to check out. So I'm moving from myself to him. But also when I'm doing it, I'm also talking to you. So I have to use that second person. When I do a tutorial, say for LinkedIn Learning, one of the things I always say is to get yourself started, open the. And when I'm writing those sort of things, there's that point of view, and you can swing it around. War stories also, your experiences, I call them war stories, are wonderful for switching point of view because you've got this very interesting story going on and then you sort of break it up with, and by the way, I encountered this very same point when I was at this event or I was talking to this individual, and suddenly it's a whole different perspective, and then it's back to, and now that you understand what I was talking about, let's get into it. There is another author I follow religiously. I love his work. His name is, he's an Italian author from 1950s, there around. His name is Giovanni Guasecchi. He has written a series of basically humorous books about a village priest dealing with the communist mayor. They're the stories of Don Camillo. And the whole series, every page of the book is written from the third person. It's almost as though you're watching Don Camillo and Pepone duke it out. And he also has a very interesting technique, which I don't think a lot of people have been able to master. This guy has. He brings in Jesus on the cross as sort of like the chorus, the Greek chorus. And Don Camillo will go talk to Jesus about something that's going on, and he'll get advice from him, and then back to the fighting between Pepone and Don Camillo. If you really want to understand how to work with that third person narrative throughout and keep the voice, get a copy of The Little World of Don Camillo, Doncamillo. You will enjoy it. And the final technique is consistency. Consistency is a glue that holds the story together. Don't change your voice. Don't change from my style, which is relaxed, to suddenly formal right in the middle of it, and then back to relaxed. It's got to remain consistent. And as you start constantly writing and producing work, people are going to recognize your voice if it's consistent. You know, when I wrote that piece on ageism, it was 3,500 words. It's gotten, I don't know, 60,000 views or something like that on Medium. I'm not into that sort of thing. But people that know my work read it and said, "My God, Tom, that was really well done." And then I followed it up with a tutorial. And that was the same voice both ways. They knew who I was. You didn't need to have my little badge up here in the corner. You just had to read it and know, yeah, that was what Tom wrote. And once you find that voice and you've really mastered it and you're comfortable with it, it will ripple through everything you do, everything, because you're comfortable in your skin. You're not trying to impress. You have found your groove. It's a good way of putting it, really. You have found your groove. If you take a look at my tutorials, my books, I have found my groove. I found my groove with Susan Hobbs. And I don't wish it upon any author, that experience, but I kind of wish it on every author because it's invaluable. Because once you find your writing voice, you're on your way. So there you go. That's kind of dealing with finding your voice as a writer. Your voice will travel with you. It will just ripple, as I said, through everything you will write. I am currently in the process of creating a course for LinkedIn Learning, and I'm writing all the scripts. And if you took my scripts and threw them up on Medium, for instance, you'd just see me writing away. I just published a book with Apress. I think it's my 15th or 16th with that company. And again, if you go through all my books that I've written for Apress, they've got my voice. And one final little war story about working with Apress. Apress had an speaking at conferences and so on, talking about that very subject and getting really deep into it. And they contacted me and said, "This author, we need to redo the book, but it reads like a PhD thesis. Could you work with her to make it more approachable, make it more user-friendly?" And we did, and the book just absolutely took off. And it was easy to do because I had my voice. And all I did with Sylvia was say, "You give me the facts. I will do the writing. And if I'm off base, stop me." So there you go. So I'm open now for questions. We got about 5 minutes to go, so fire away. Francis, I just saw your comment about writing. What are the takeaways? The takeaways are find your voice. And I got into them right at the beginning. Develop a style, set your tone, get comfortable with your tone, use vocabulary that you would use, not someone else would use. Explore point of view, first person, second person, third person. And once you find your voice, be consistent. And back to Francis. I disagree with what you're saying about 12 to 15-year-olds. You've got to write to your audience. Francis, if I was to write to a 12 or 15-year-old, would I not be insulting you? It's all just comes down to who is it? Who are you writing for? Any other questions? Eat Shoots and Leaves. I love that book. DW. Grammarly and I argue all the time because it is still learning about fiction dialogue. Absolutely. Absolutely. Basically, what Grammarly does is just check structure. Like I said, it's going to tell you where to put the commas and where to put the exclamation marks and where to put the quotation marks and all the grammar stuff. And you can basically, that's why they have that little trash can up there. You can say, go away, and click the trash can. What's the best tip you can give to someone from a journalism background to find an individual voice? That's a great question, Katie. I have a journalism background. And the crazy thing is that journalists, especially magazine journalists, have their own voice. They develop it as they move through their career. My advice to you, Katie, is start finding journalists that you really like, and don't go to newspapers because it's sort of formulaic. Look at magazines. I don't know. The best magazine for writing is New York. It's just the absolute best. Another one that I love to read is Esquire. They have some really great articles. And one journalist that I absolutely adore for finding a voice, if you want to really dig into a journalist that's found his voice, Michael Hare with his book Dispatches about the Vietnam War. It is, the perspective and the point of view of that book is stunning. And he brings the war right into you using his own voice. Oh, that's right. The New Yorker, New York Magazine. Actually, New York Magazine, Matt. Is it Matt? No, I'm sorry, Gwen. New York Magazine, Gwen, has some really outstanding writers as well. How can we improve if we have an editor, if we don't have an editor like you have? That's Bella. And use that little voice in your head and says, this is the way I would say it. Is there an easier way of saying it? Can I shorten this? You know, it's easy to write a run-on sentence, but one of the things that you might want to take a look at is how to write a précis, where you take 12 paragraphs of something and break it down to one paragraph. That'll teach you to shorten sentence structure. Let's see. Still going through these, so bear with me. Can you grow as a writer and stay consistent in your voice? This is from Marty. Absolutely, Marty. Once you've developed your voice, as I said, it will ripple through everything you do then and subsequently. Again, if you read one of my books or go to my one of my LinkedIn courses and then look up my ageism article on Medium, you'll see that it's me. And you're seeing me now. And this is kind of the way I write. I'm a little bit more concise, you know, but generally my personality or my voice comes through. Well, I guess that's just about it. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to toss my email into the chat, and feel free to ask me any other questions. As I like to tell people that I run into, that I do these sessions with, feel free to bug me. I will answer them. So here it is. It's tomgreen17@gmail.com. Just remind me that it was the Medium session that you're asking about, so that way I know what this is about. You can also, you know, DM me on LinkedIn if you want to, or on Twitter, whatever. So I'm going to ask you a question I ask every class that I've ever done before I wind up. And here it is. Did you learn anything? Fabulous, because if you've learned something, I've done my job. It has been great to meet you. You've got my email address. As I say, feel free to bug me, DM me. I'm available. I'm a teacher. That's my job. So if you've got a question about something you're doing, or you want me to take a look at something you've written, don't give me a chapter. But if you a couple of paragraphs and you want me to take a look at it and give you some tips or just some suggestions, feel free. Just remember, you're the writer, okay? I'm the commenter. As the writer, you have the right to tell anybody that jumps in on your work and says you shouldn't be doing that, or should say it this way. You have every right to tell them to piss off. So there you go. It's been great to meet you, and have a great day.